Okay, this is method 15, distress plaster. This is a great finish for things like anything with an Italian theme. It can be done on an exterior application, or like I do a lot of wine rooms with this. Great finish. You can do a ton of different color combinations because you're doing so many different layers of glazing, and just gives a nice, cool texture. Okay, what I have for this finish is my wall. It's totally flat and it's based with 2 coats of Benmore OC6 Regal Matte. And on top of that, we're going to do our first process. We're going to be glazing and throwing some isopropyl alcohol into it to create kind of a neat background effect. And for that, I'm going to need Proceed Full Body Glazing Medium, Aquacolor Earth Brown, and Aquacolor Dark Brown. I'm going to mix 2 glazes. The first one's going to be 8 ounces of the glaze to 2 tablespoons of Earth Brown. And the other one is going to be 8 ounces of the glaze to 2 teaspoons of dark brown. So I'll get that mixed up and then we'll go over the tools. Okay, so I've got a weenie roller, a 3/8 inch weenie roller, and my earth brown mix is in that, and that's what I'm going to use to apply it. And I'm not going to be putting a lot of the dark brown glaze in, so I'm just going to use chip brushes in a container. And then you want to just get some isopropyl alcohol from Walgreens, Safeway, wherever. And you just want to have a squirt bottle with some water and some shop towels. All right. Okay, so I got my earth brown on the roller, and I'm just going to randomly apply it to the majority of the wall. Okay, now I'm going to grab my dark brown glaze and a chip brush. And I'm just going to randomly throw this in some areas. Okay, now I want to grab my shop towels. I get a big wad of these. I make a flat pad. And I'm just going to push my glaze around and make it so it fill in these voids and get it full coverage. Okay, now next step we're going to grab our isopropyl alcohol, and I just have it in a container. And I'm just going to randomly flick it onto my finish. And what this is going to do is wherever I flick it, it's going to freeze dry the glaze. And I'm going to let it set up, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how we're going to kind of extract it, and it's going to create these cool patterns. And I can also take my squirt bottle and kind of like a light trigger, and I'm going to kind of create these water drips, just randomly let it kind of run down the wall. Let's do a little bit of that, and then I can come back and do a little more activation. Now while that's setting up, it's going to take a few minutes so I can move on to my next section. Okay, so what you're seeing, these little watermarks, that's from the isopropyl, where I'm talking about it's freeze drying the glaze in there. So the glaze on top is actually still wet, but these spots are drying a lot faster, so I need to let them set up, and then I can come back in and kind of squeegee the glaze off the top, and they'll be frozen. They'll have this really cool texture. Okay, to test for when it's ready, I should be able to take the wet glaze right off the top and have this really cool like paint texture look that's created by the isopropyl just stuck there. Like I should be able to move it. So if I'm going too early, I'm gonna kind of tap in, and if I don't see that like frozen there and it's kind of like just smushing it around, then I know I'm too early, so I just need to back off and let it kind of sit in there and cook. Okay, so it's starting to set up, and so what I can start to do is just like lightly kind of blot off, and you can see this cool effect kind of coming through here. All right, I see a lot of people say to do this with like a little 3-inch foam brush, and I mean, if you have all the time in the world, by all means, go ahead and do it, but you can also just take your shop towel, and once it's set up, you can just start flying across your surface, and it's a done deal. Okay, and now as I'm taking out this like isopropyl look, you know, and I'm moving across the wall, I'm gonna leave some spots kind of heavier just to create like kind of highs and lows and a little more interest. So I'm just randomly kind of gonna go, you know, maybe 1 or 2 passes across the wall just to kind of hit some different random areas and kind of create a random effect. Like this dripping, I like that as opposed to this next to it. So I mean, just to give it like a little more interest and some variation, I'm gonna leave that alone. Okay, so I've got that where I want it. I'm gonna let it set up. And the most important thing too, when you're going around patting around, is what this does too is it eliminates all those brush strokes. And you know, because I don't want anybody to know how I put this on. It's supposed to look like an old natural organic wall. So, you know, if you see any like distinct brush strokes, just give them a little pat and they'll diffuse and go away. And with the glaze, again, I'm getting like 1,000, 1,200 square feet per gallon. Okay, so now that my glaze is set up, we're gonna move on to using FAUX Plaster by FAUX, and we're gonna lay that in with a hawk and trowel, so I'll get that set up and be right back. Okay, so I got my FAUX on my hawk, I got my trowel, and here's the concept is we're gonna kind of do a sandwich thing. I create these random peaks on my trowel, and that's how we're gonna apply the plaster to this one. Now this, it's not just going to be a systematic thing where you're just kind of slapping it on there. You have to think kind of organically and like give it a random effect. And the easiest way to do that is like constantly be reloading your plaster to create different peaks on your trowel and constantly be moving around the wall in a different manner. Okay, so I don't just like finish this area. I'm going to kind of jump around. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of lightly tap down. And this is kind of like a process, so it's not like I do that area and then I'm done, okay? I kind of lay it in. If I'm getting like the same kind of plaster movement repetitively, it means that I have like too much plaster on my trowel in one manner, so I need to kind of go and reset it by doing that. Because you definitely don't want to get enough plaster on your trowel that you're like doing that and it's forming a square, because then people can see you obviously use this square tool to put it on. Clean it off. Lightly knock it down, and you're starting to create this kind of organic texture over the top. So what I'm going to do is just take the next few minutes and just kind of jump around and kind of place my plaster in. All right. Okay, when I'm knocking it down, this is a vertical finish, so I'm not knocking it down left to right, it's always top to bottom. Lay it down. And if I'm down on my baseboard, it's okay to go from the bottom to the top. And then another thing you can do while you're doing this, if when you were activating, if you have any areas that you're like just disgusted with, you don't think turned out right, you can lay more plaster in over those areas to kind of make them go away. So that's what's kind of nice about these multi-level finishes is if something goes wrong in one layer, you can fix it in the next. Okay, so just step back, check your composition, and make sure you know it's kind of where you want it. And a lot of times, you know, depending on how rustic you want it, sometimes I go in and lay like just areas of pure plaster, you know, to make bigger breakaways and so forth. But this, I'm just kind of going for a random all over feel, just random texture. And I get probably about, you know, 120, 150 square feet a gallon with the FAUX doing this one. Okay, so now my FAUX is dry, and what I need to do is just give it a light sand before we can oversand it. So I'll just take a 220 grit paper and just run over the surface. Okay, now what we're going to do is oversand this, and to oversand it I'm going to use the same 2 glazes we used on this first step. And I also need a squirt bottle and some isopropyl alcohol again, some shop towels. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mist the whole surface. I'm working with water. And that's just going to help my glaze slide over this rough plaster we've applied the FAUX. Okay, first I'm going to use the earth brown. Make sure that we mixed up the glaze and just kind of randomly apply that. On a large surface you can apply it with a roller. Now I'll come in with my dark brown glaze mixture and just randomly apply that in some areas as well. Okay, so now I have my glaze on. I'm just going to lightly mist the surface again. And I've just got a large chip brush, or you could use like a wallpaper brush. And I'm just going to brush in the areas where I didn't get any glaze, where the plaster is still totally white. Just kind of whisk over those areas because I don't want really any of my plaster to be completely white because it's just be too much contrast. Okay, so now I've got like all my FAUX covered in glaze. What I'll do first is just come in and I'm just gonna randomly like pull some of this glaze back off and leave some areas heavy, but just to create some highs and lows in the glaze we just put on. Okay, now I'm going to take my squirt bottle and some isopropyl, and I'm going to come in and just, some of these areas I've left my glaze on heavy. I'll come in and just create some drifts and runs. And on this step you have tons and tons of working time. If it starts setting up on you or freezing into your plaster, you just hit it with a little more water. Alright, and then I'll take my isopropyl in a container. I'm just going to come in and kind of flick it. And I especially want to flick these water runs that I just created because it causes the water to really break up so it's not just like a straight drip. Okay, for my final step, what I'm going to do is I've got, all these new drifts and runs and everything. Now I'm going to kind of go in and pick and choose and manipulate my finish, like you maybe get rid of some of them so it's not quite as busy. So I'll just come in and it's still totally wet, so I can erase any of them I don't like or manipulate them. And I especially am looking for, I have an area here where I can totally see brush strokes still. I need to get rid of that. So you just want to kind of artistically remove and manipulate your final finish.